Welcome, everyone, to day 2 of our Packers News NFL draft coverage. Alongside Pete Dougherty, I am Olivia Reiner. The Packers added a couple of offensive weapons to their arsenal through today's draft. We'll let you know everything you need to know about those two players in just a moment. However, as always, you know the drill. You can be a part of our conversation. If you're over on Facebook, Periscope, or YouTube, leave us a question down in the chat. Pete and I want to hear from you. We'll get to some of your thoughts toward the end of our conversation today. With their second pick in the draft, the Packers selected a center out of Ohio State. No, if you think that sounds familiar, I'm not talking about center Corey Linsley. I'm talking about Josh Myers, who also hails from Ohio State. What do the Packers like so much about these centers from Ohio State?
Yeah, I guess it makes sense because, Ohio State's not Alabama, but it's kind of the next best thing as far as producing pro players probably. And they always they produce a lot of good linemen. And, they drafted this guy in the second round, which tells you they think he's got a really good shot at starting as a rookie with that job being open with Corey Linsley being gone. So, if you had to bet right now, you'd bet that at least to start the season, Jenkins and Turner are the tackles. And the rookie is the center, and Lucas Patrick and Runyon are the guards. That would be the best guess, unless one of the holdover backups, deep backups from last year, developmental guys, makes a big jump this offseason.
Myers isn't just any old center. He is the tallest in this year's draft. At 6'5", 310 pounds, he's practically a tackle in a center's body. He's about 2 inches taller than Corey Linsley and 10 pounds heavier. What are some of the pros and cons of a really big center?
Gutekunst talked about that after, when he came out after the third round finished up. And it's clear, and he's brought this up at other times in the past, everybody in football likes to have, you want to be big. The bigger, the better. But especially playing, in a cold climate outdoors like they do here, and this goes back at least to Ron Wolf. That was a big thing with him. And they like guys who are big for their position, and so that's what I think they liked about this guy, is that he's just another big guy, and he makes them a bigger team. And at 6'5", I don't know. I would guess the average center and average starting center in the league is more like 6'2", maybe 6'3". So this guy's bigger. But they said he bends pretty well. And, it made me think of, Mike Flanagan was a really good center for the Packers in the early 2000s. And he was 6'5". He was a big guy. So it definitely, can be done. And like I said earlier, they, draft a center in the second round unless you think the guy's got a pretty decent shot at starting for you as a rookie.
Let's take a look at what the Packers did in the third round of this year's draft. General manager Brian Gutekunst has said he is not afraid to move around and move up to get a player that he really wants. That's exactly what he did in the third round. He traded away his third-round pick and his fourth-round pick in this year's draft to move up in the third round and select wide receiver Amari Rodgers. Rodgers is more of a slot receiver type who thrives on quick targets, and he's comparable to someone that the Packers are really familiar with, wide receiver Randall Cobb. How likely is it that Amari Rodgers can contribute to the Packers not only on offense but also on special teams immediately this season?
I would think he'll play at least some, and he looks like he's a ready-made return guy. I think he returned 60-some punts in his career, and he said on his conference call that he'd like to return kickoffs too. And he's short, and this is how Gutekunst put it, but I remember thinking this is exactly what I thought when I looked at his size. He's short, 5'9.5", but he's not small. He's 212 pounds. That's bigger than Aaron Jones. That's as big as a lot of running backs in the league. So he's, even though he's short, he also fits that mold of a guy who's bigger for his position as far as his weight. He really is built like a running back. And you would think the jet sweep bubble screen stuff, they run a lot of that motion and they like to throw those bubble screens. You would think that would be right up this guy's alley. So I would think he'd get at least some playing time as a rookie. And I think sounds like he did a lot of that stuff at Clemson too. And he's ready made for it. So, and they haven't, after, when they had injuries last year, they didn't have anybody good to play that role. And that's a big part of their offense. Just having the threat of the jet sweep, I think, is a big part of Matt LaFleur's offense. And I would guess this guy will get, decent playing time, maybe a quarter of the snaps, maybe even more. They really haven't had a real, what you would call a slot receiver since going back to Cobb. And, actually this guy's, he's shorter than Cobb, but he's a lot bigger. Cobb, I think, was only about 190 pounds.
The Packers add a wide receiver to their room this season, which is massively important, not just because he can potentially help the Packers offense in this season, but also because the Packers are going to need the help next season in 2022. 4 Packers wide receivers are slated to become unrestricted free agents, including Devante Adams, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Equanimous St. Brown, and Devin Funchess. How likely is it that the Packers aren't done adding wide receiving talent in this year's draft, knowing what's ahead down the line?
What do they have? 5 picks left? Is that right? I think so. They spent 4 and they started with 10. So
yep.
That actually had to be 6 then. So they still have a lot of picks to go. They have plenty of needs, and now you start getting into these, the 4th and especially 5th, 6th, and 7th rounds. I mean, it's a lot iffier if these guys are ever gonna make your team or be decent players. So I could see them picking multiple guys. Adding another corner. They've already drafted one. Adding another wide receiver, I would think there's a pretty decent chance of that. You got to think there's a great chance they're going to add some kind of offensive lineman. So that would be a second offensive lineman too. We've seen Gutekunst double and triple up at positions. Actually, are trying to think, maybe that was Thompson who picked the 3 wide receivers. Oh, I think that was Gutekunst. He picked the 3 wide receivers the one year, and Thompson picked the 3 running backs the year before that. Which isn't a bad approach because. Not all of them, chances are not all are going to pan out, but maybe one of the 3 will end up being a good player like Aaron Jones ended up being. So, yeah, I could see him doubling it up at any number of positions. Running back, they also could use a number 3 running back. And who knows, maybe they draft a quarterback in the 5th, 6th, or 7th round too.
What do you think, Packers fans? What positions would you like to see Brian Gutekunst address on day 3? Leave us a comment down in the chat. Let us know how you're feeling. We're going to get to some of your questions right this moment. Thank you all for joining us. We'll start with Pack 1 on YouTube. Pack 1 says, with the Packers finally selecting a wide receiver, what now? Where now does Aaron Rodgers stand? Does this change anything with 12? Aaron Rodgers and the Packers have had a rocky past 24 hours that we know of publicly. It sounds like it has been going back weeks, if not longer than that, as Rodgers has said that, reportedly, he hasn't said it on the record, has said that he does not want to return to the team this upcoming season. How does drafting a wide receiver impact Rodgers' decision to come back in 2021?
Yeah, I don't know. He's the only one who knows that. I kind of find it hard to believe it would actually make much of a difference at this point. I think the issue's deeper than that, and it's all about Jordan Love and him still carrying hostility or being upset about that from a year ago. So I wouldn't think it would make much of a difference. That's basically all I've been thinking, talking, and writing about is Aaron Rodgers. I mean, I barely even watched the draft tonight. That's why apologies, but I don't even know how many picks they have left. There are so many ways this could still go. I still think it doesn't bode well for his return that he made sure this news broke, yesterday on the biggest day of the NFL offseason. He seems like a guy by his history where if he makes up his mind about something, it's going to be pretty tough to change it if he's really upset. Mike Freeman from Bleacher Report last year called him a world-class grudge holder, and I think that's pretty true. So those things don't bode well for him coming back, but the Packers don't have to trade him, and then that would be interesting if he's unhappy and they don't trade him. Then what does he do? Holding out costs $40,000 a day in training camp. If he retires, he'd have to return, the Packers could force him to return $29.8 million actually. So there's no way he's going to retire. He's not going to get back. That's just too big a chunk of money. So then does he show up and just, be a really unhappy guy and be surly and be like he was, or even worse? I'm sure worse than in 2018, McCarthy's last year, and we saw how that went. So then the Packers would have to decide, do they really want to deal with that, or are they better off just trading him? There's just so many ways. And maybe they reach a contract agreement and maybe just a nice signing bonus and a little bit of a raise for the next 3 years. Maybe that'll be enough to make him feel like he won and assuage him, and he'll be back. It's just, we could still be talking about this 2 months from now. They don't have to do anything immediately. It really doesn't start coming to a head until camp starts.
We currently have a lot more questions than we do have answers. However, Pete, Mike wants to know if you could put a number on it. What are the odds of Rodgers putting on a Packers jersey again? And I'm not talking about Amari Rodgers, Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. So look, just take this for what it's worth, because it's just a wild guess. I'll answer the question, but I don't know, and nobody else knows. Just my wild guess is maybe 20% chance he's back. Maybe not even that. That's just my guess. Who knows what's been happening in the last couple of days? I just think this sure looks to me like it's heading for a divorce.
Thank you, Mike, for your question. Let's take a question from Nolan here. Nolan wants to know if defensive tackle Damon Snacks Harrison is still a free agent, and how many defensive tackles are still available on the draft board. Nolan clearly thinks defensive line is a need for the Packers in this year's draft. However, on live streams past, we've talked about the fact that this year's defensive line class, it's just a bit of a shallow talent pool. What are the Packers' options to acquire or beef up the defensive line room if they don't draft a defensive lineman in this year's draft?
I think Harrison is out there. I kind of would have guessed they would have re-signed him by now. I mean, they had him at the end of the season, so if they were going to do that, I'm guessing they would have re-signed him. One thing they could do, I mean, there's a couple veteran guys who used to be really good defensive tackles who are now in their 30s. So they're on their way down, and they might even basically, be too low on the gas tank to be worth signing, but they might have something left and be able to help as a part-time rotational player. Jarrell Casey, Sheldon Richardson, I think, is still out there, and Geno Atkins. Those are the three guys that come to mind. So they could try to sign one of those guys to a short-term deal. They could even, once June 1 passes, they could cut Dean Lowry, and then his signing bonus acceleration from next year wouldn't come to this year. So they'd save a lot of cap room there and use that money to sign one of those three guys, or they could just try to create the room else in other ways, like doing an extension with Devante Adams. So that would be the only way, is to sign someone. It doesn't seem like that's in the cards, but you never know what they're going to do and what they have planned. And, maybe that's something they're still thinking about.
Atkins is 33 years old, Casey 31 years old. The big question is, do they still have some gas left in the tank? Yeah. Only the Packers will be able to know that and evaluate that. Thank you so much, Nolan, for your question. Let's go to Dave on Facebook. Dave wants to know, has covering the draft from home presented any problems for you as media or benefits? Pete, how do you like covering the draft from your home and not at Lambeau Field?
It's a mixed bag, mixed feelings, because it's good to, be out there, to be around people, and the press conferences, you can ask questions and follow-ups, and you can just jump in instead of having to wait in line, with the Zoom calls. It's just good to be around people and to talk to colleagues and all that. On the other hand, it's really convenient, sitting in the recliner with the computer, on the arm, and it's really comfortable sitting there in sweats. So that part's good, but basically, except for a 45-minute trip to the YMCA, I've sat in my living room all day on the phone and writing and all that. So that gets a little, I'm getting a little stir crazy. So I don't know. What do you think?
I've enjoyed it. It's nice. The only issues that I've had, like figuring out lighting and trying to create an adequate draft setup, typically we would just be at Lambeau Field. We'd be shooting somewhere in Lambeau. So just trying to coordinate the technicalities of the live stream. It's just been a little bit different. However, listen, I'm just glad we get to cover football and do our jobs in some capacity during all of this. Thank you, Dave, for your question and allowing us to peel back the curtain a little bit. Let's take a question here over on Periscope. Does bringing Amari Rodgers in mean that Tyler Irvin is gone? The Packers had Tyler Irvin, who played, both as a wide receiver, as kind of like a jet motion type of back, and then he spent some time with the running backs as well. And of course, he was the Packers return specialist this past season and for part of the season beforehand when the Packers acquired him in free agency. He's a free agent now. The Packers haven't brought him back, and now they have Rodgers, who has some experience in the return game. What does this mean for Tyler Irvin and his future with the Packers?
I mean, I think we can only assume that there's no way he's coming back now. And, he just had too many injury issues. He's a smaller guy, shorter and smaller. And just too many injury issues there. So I think the Packers, it sure looked like they had moved on anyway. And I would think, drafting this Rodgers, pretty much cinches it.
Let's go over to Matthew on Facebook. Matthew asks, will Devante Adams get a new contract? We mentioned that Adams becomes an unrestricted free agent in 2022. However, the Packers can come to an extension with him at any time. We saw nose tackle Kenny Clark right around training camp, during training camp. He signed a contract extension. Several months later, David Bakhtiari came to an extension before hitting the open market. When will the Packers come to an agreement with Devante Adams?
I mean, you still have to think they're going to. I mean, he's just too good a player to let walk out the door. I've talked with, one or two people in the league, now with the Packers. At least one person said, they win all their games when he hasn't played the last 2 years, so maybe they would let him walk. But I just find that really hard to believe. He's just too good a player, and he's young enough where he's still got 2 or 3 really, really good years at least left ahead of him as long as he stays healthy. And his injury history is great as far as serious injuries go. So you got to think it's going to get done, but maybe it's one of those. It's not something they have to do now. So maybe they're just going slow. Maybe he's asking for just a mammoth contract, so they're just trying to wait him out. And the closer you get to camp, the more his price will come down because when he signs the deal and gets a huge signing bonus, that money's his, even if he does sustain a catastrophic injury that ends up diminishing his career. And we're talking about a huge amount of money. I kind of pegged the bonus just kind of guessing at about $30 million. And we've talked about this on in other Facebook Lives, but, $30 million, that's a lot of money. And, if they have it sitting in some account collecting interest or, in the market, even a couple months worth of money, you're still talking of interest or revenue. You're still talking, real money that they can use to help cover their costs and pay their bills. So maybe they're waiting just because the longer they wait, the more money they can collect on, make off of that money. That might be a little part of it too.
We'll see when and if the Packers come to that extension with Devante Adams. Of course, we'll keep you updated over on PackersNews.com. Thank you, Matthew, for your question, and thank you all so much for joining us tonight. We will be back tomorrow after day 3 of the draft to wrap everything up and to bring you all of the updates, let you know everything you need to know about the Packers' newest players. For Pete Dougherty, I am Olivia Reiner. We will see you next time.